Truth can be difficult to speak, truth can be ugly, truth can be painful, but the truth must be told. An Indian movie, The Kerala Story, has gained a lot of popularity in India and elsewhere. As expected, many are praising the movie and many are criticizing it. In particular, many in countries like Turkey, Malaysia and Pakistan are even claiming that the movie is Islamophobic. The movie has triggered debate and discussion on some of the most difficult and sensitive subjects like 1. Support for ISIS, 2. Radicalization, suicide bombing and support for Islamic terrorism, 3. The demographic change and the Muslim population growth, 4. Willingness to impose Sharia as the official law of the land, 5. Religious conversion to Islam, and 6. Muslims' attitude towards women. So, for a neutral observer, before drawing any conclusion, it is very important to properly understand how Muslims or people living in the Muslim majority nations see these 6 points. After all, how Muslims feel about these 6 points can be best described by Muslims themselves, right? So please, pay attention. Point 1. So how do Muslims feel about groups like ISIS? According to Pew Research Center, when it comes to support for ISIS, 20% of Nigerian Muslims and 12% of Malaysian Muslims said that they have a favorable view of ISIS. 8% of people in Turkey and 9% of Pakistanis showed support for ISIS. Mind you, these numbers can't be taken lightly, as it seems very clear that millions of Muslims in these countries support ISIS. Yes, almost 1 in 10 Pakistanis have a favorable view of ISIS, and yet many Pakistanis have the audacity to claim that the movie The Kerala Story is Islamophobic. How does that sound? Point 2. Radicalization, suicide bombing and support for terrorism. Now, let me tell you something. This really shocked me. According to Pew Research Center, Muslims were asked about their attitude towards suicide bombing and other forms of violence against civilian targets to defend Islam. Yes, pay attention to these words, suicide bombing and violence against civilian targets. A mind-blowing 88% in Jordan said it can be justified. In Turkey, 20% of Muslims said that support for suicide bombings and other acts of violence in defense of Islam can be justified. In Indonesia, 33%. You can do the calculation yourself. In 2011, when the same question was asked to Muslims in Bangladesh, Pakistan and Afghanistan, which are India's neighbors, the results were shocking. 57% of Muslims in Afghanistan, 46% of Muslims in Bangladesh and 16% of Muslims in Pakistan said that suicide bombings and other acts of violence can be justified. Mind you, these numbers are massive as there are millions of Muslims in these countries. And remember, these are the so-called ordinary Muslims sharing their views and showing their mentality. So there is no point in claiming that this report is Islamophobic, right? Yes, it is important to keep in mind that these respondents are actually Muslims who have shared their views about support for suicide bombing and support for acts of terrorism in defense of Islam. Now see this. When it comes to Muslims' views about Osama bin Laden, these findings may shock you. Many Muslims in these countries showed confidence in Osama bin Laden to do the right thing regarding world affairs. Point 3. The demographic change and the Muslim population growth. According to Pew Research Center, the number of Muslims is expected to exceed the number of Christians by the end of the century, which will make Islam the world's largest religion. Also, it has been projected that 10% of all Europeans will be Muslims by 2050. But why is the global Muslim population growing? As shown here, one of the main reasons is that Muslims have more children than members of other religious groups. Around the world, each Muslim woman has an average of 2.9 children compared with 2.2 for all other groups combined. When it comes to estimated number of children per woman, Muslims are ahead of non-Muslims, whether it is Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, North Africa, North America, the Asia Pacific or Europe. Can anyone deny these facts? Not only that, it was also revealed that 47% of Muslims in Pakistan and 32% of Muslims in Bangladesh think that family planning is morally wrong. Point 4. Willingness to impose Sharia as the official law of the land. Take a look at this. Massive support for Sharia from Muslims around the world. 99% of Muslims in Afghanistan, 84% in Pakistan and 82% in Bangladesh favor making Sharia the official law in their country. And many even like the idea of implementing Sharia law on non-Muslims as well. You can see it here. And yes, take a look at this. So many Muslims in multiple countries favor the death penalty for those who leave the Muslim religion. It's also important to mention that majorities in Pakistan, Morocco and Jordan say they self-identify first as Muslims, rather than as Pakistanis, Moroccans or Jordanians. So, nation first or Islam first? Well, you have the answer here. Point 5. Religious conversion to Islam. An overwhelming majority of Muslims in multiple countries believe that it is their religious duty to try to convert others to the Islamic faith. In Pakistan, 85%, Afghanistan, 96%. See this, so many countries where it is more than 80%. And yes, just like how many Christians do, Muslims also invalidate other faiths openly. In multiple countries, overwhelming majorities of Muslims said that Islam is the only religion that leads to eternal life in heaven. Pakistan, 92%, Bangladesh, 88%. I mean, just take a look at this. Is this how they teach inclusivity and mutual respect? Point 6. Muslims' attitude towards women. The Kerala story is centered around the story of women. And of course, it is important to understand how Muslims view women. In multiple countries, overwhelming majorities of Muslims said that a wife should always obey her husband. I mean, just take a look at this. This is absolutely shocking. Muslims in many countries overwhelmingly hold this view. Not only that, many Muslims like the idea of stoning as punishment for adultery. And as you can see here, massive support for honor killings of women who have been accused of pre- or extramarital sex. I mean, take a look. These are Muslim respondents sharing their views and revealing their thoughts. Not only that, many Muslims believe that sons should have a greater right to parents' inheritance. I mean, see this section. The majority of Muslims in multiple countries said that. Not only that, as revealed here, there are countries where the majority of Muslims believe that a wife should not have the right to divorce her husband. And of course, as shown here, polygamy is morally acceptable for the majority of Muslims in multiple countries. Currently, many Muslims in countries like Turkey, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Malaysia are criticizing this Indian movie. But before you take their criticism seriously, shouldn't you at least try to understand the mentality and viewpoint of Muslims in those countries? Through my data-driven work, I have attempted to do just that. According to the director of the Kerala story, the movie is not anti-Islam and it has taken 7 years, hundreds of hours of video testimony and hundreds of pages of documents and information collected from all over the world to make the movie. But here, one should remember that a movie cannot be a peer-reviewed academic paper and may contain factual inaccuracies. But at least for many, this movie has brought attention to the 6 points that I have highlighted. Now, it doesn't mean that Islamophobia doesn't exist. In Europe, in countries like Hungary, Italy, Poland and Greece, most people have an unfavorable view of Muslims. And yes, many Muslims face a lot of discrimination in different parts of Europe. That is why, in this episode, in order to develop a better understanding of Islam and Muslims, I have used the viewpoints of Muslims and people living in the Muslim majority nations. Perhaps the best way to understand Muslims is to just listen to the Muslim viewpoint. After all, who knows more about Muslims than Muslims themselves, right? See you again.